Syria is free. The fall of Bashar al-Assad's ruthless regime marks a major turning point in the country's history, bringing an end to more than 20 years of oppression and bloodshed. But the terror extended back even further to his father Hafez, who took power in 1971. Those old enough to remember had choice words. Take a listen.
عاصرت اليوم عهد الرئيس السابق حافظ الأسد وبشار الأسد. شو بدك تقولي؟
حافظ الأسد
خرعت اثنين.
لا أمي لا يضربوا.
Dissent was not tolerated. Political prisoners were locked up for decades. Death toll estimates from the war range as high as 620,000. For these reasons and so many more, many journalists were unable to conceal how moved they were by the significance of the moment. Some taking off their protective equipment live on air. An Al-Jazeera team breaking down in front of the camera. And Assad's toppling marked the first time some of these journalists could return home.
13 سنة تهجير رجعت لبيتي رجع لحق لاصحابه 13 سنة هجرت من ضيعتي ومن بيتي
سوريا وإلى مدينة دمشق بعد 14 عاما من الفقد. هذه ليست قصتي فحسب بل هي قصة كل إن لم يكن معظم الصحفيين السوريين خارج سوريا.
Major challenges remain to unite Syria, to rebuild Syria, and a free and critical press as important as ever. Our guests are Zeina, Shahla, a freelance journalist based in Damascus, and joining us from Istanbul is Sara Ajlyakin, the deputy director of Al-Jumhuriya, an award-winning collective of journalists covering Syria. Tell us about the collective that Al-Jumhuriya is and what work it does.
I think, first of all, it's very beautiful to hear my colleague Zeina from Damascus, and I salute her. Al-Jumhuriya was founded in 2012, and I mean, significantly, what you're talking to a journalist in Damascus and someone in exile, and like many Syrian journalists and Syrian civil society in general, we have been exiled ever since, and we work in a hybrid form. So yes, even though we are registered and operate abroad, we do have a network of reporters and journalists and media practitioners on the ground as well.
Yeah, Zeina, for you covering this, how long have you been covering the conflict, and how has it evolved over the past few months?
I've been working as a journalist since around 8 years. But yeah, the past few months were really crazy, especially like the past 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So we've been like following the news all the time and following how the people were feeling, because everyone is having mixed feelings, like it's kind of hope and fear and uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen. But now I can say that we are relieved, and I can see this in the eyes of my colleagues and photojournalists, journalists who are now experiencing how we can work freely in the country.
Yeah, on that note, Zeina, tell us, how were journalists treated before the fall of Assad? Was there suspicion towards them, or were they respected?
Yeah, actually, it wasn't easy to work as journalists at all in Syria and regime areas. So you would need authorization for every single thing you would need to do. It's not easy to film, to take photos in any place. Actually, one of my photojournalist colleagues, he was detained this year for 1 week only for taking a photo in the street, and he was disappeared for 1 week. We couldn't know where he was. You can imagine like this, and like we have hundreds of journalists who were killed in Syria. So it was. We always say that we don't have like journalism in Syria. We only have journalists. So it was like a very dark scene. But now I think the things will go so different.
Sara, I'm curious about your perspective from across the border. In the early days of the offensive, it seemed like there was an explosion of either misinformation or disinformation online. How does Al-Jumhuriya vet this information, and how were you able to make sense of it when it was evolving so rapidly?
Absolutely. I mean, the sheer speed of events on the ground made it extremely difficult to verify. But at the same time, we did what we've been doing for the past 12 years. We have our sources on the ground. We take a breath. I mean, Syria has been breaking news in a very quick rhythm over the past 12 years. We always try to take a breath, contextualize, give context, give sources, triangulate, what any professional news agency would do.
All right, I want you to listen to a soundbite I found from someone online, a journalist, who said she was stopped by a member of HTS, and this is what he asked her. Take a listen.
اصلا هو لما سال قال طلع فيه انه انت مسيحيه علويه سنيه مو سنيه لا انه شيعيه درزيه يعني هو عنده انه كل هذه الطوائف هي بكفه وطائفه سنيه بكفه.
France 24 cannot confirm that, and if that did happen, we don't know if this soldier would be indicative of the wider HTS. Zeina, for your part on the ground, have you seen anyone like that making inquiries into people's backgrounds or ethnic or religious beliefs?
Yeah, actually, it didn't happen to me, but it happened to some of my friends. But actually, we don't know who are the men who are doing this. So we, especially in the first 2 days, we were seeing a lot of armed men in the streets. We don't know if they are HTS or other factions. But some incidents happen. Yeah, a friend of mine, someone asked her to cover her hair, and she refused this. So we are seeing something like this, but I think it's not that common. And as you said, we need to fact check because we are seeing a flood of false news, false videos, and it's really hard to make sure everything is correct. But it's important because some violations are really happening, and we need to shed the light on them.
Yeah, Sara, what about you with your organization? HTS had issued all these assurances to minorities, and the journalist clearly panicked in that clip. She said she had never felt that way before. She hadn't seen that. Have any of your reporters mentioned anything like that?
No, not yet, at least. And exactly like Zeina said, even if some instances of such occurrences did take place, it was very difficult to verify who was what and at that time. But I just want to say something that's very important. Syria has been ruled by a deeply sectarian state for the past 50 years. And to expect that this would somehow disappear with HTS or whoever is in power is a bit naive. And we, as journalists, as a sector, are going to be part and parcel of shaping media, journalism as a sphere in Syria, and we're not leaving it to HTS or anybody else or any de facto powers.
Yeah, that's
it's a chaos, but we do expect to participate even in the shaping of our own spaces.
Yeah, and given the way Syria was ran under Assad, I'm wondering if people are familiar with the role of a critical press, of a free press. Will these new leaders in Syria tolerate a press that speaks truth to power? Because there are going to be mistakes. That's just a fact of life, regardless of who's in power. But will they maybe accuse the press of being perhaps anti-revolution?
I don't expect them. I hope that our role will not be tolerated. It's not a matter of tolerance or not. I think that we have been lobbying, and this is the thing when you're exiled media or media under a dictatorship, you're never just a journalist. You're also a media. You're developing the sector, and so we don't expect to be merely tolerated. We expect to participate in forming and forging this space. We're going to impose our presence on whoever is going to be the de facto power of Syria right now or in the future. And this is why the revolution did not start 6 days ago, but 13 years ago.
Yes, it's an important point to make. Zeina, what about for you in your reporting on the ground? Were various rebel factions that you might have met, were they receptive to journalists and understand what a journalist's job is?
Yeah, until now they are so receptive. I'm hearing from a lot of colleagues that they were never treated like this from the authorities. So we go to the main building of TV, we just ask for permission and they give us. Nobody attacked any journalist or any photographer. Actually, we are now having tens, maybe hundreds of foreign journalists coming to Syria. You cannot imagine how many calls I'm getting each second from journalists coming from all around the world. And I don't think anyone attacked or say anything to them. I'm seeing how people in the streets, young people are holding their cameras and taking photos in every place. No one is saying anything to them. And hopefully this will last, not only now because all the light is shed on Syria. Hopefully it will last in the coming months and years. This is what we really want.
Real quick, Zeina, what's the next story you're working on?
Oh, okay. Now I'm working maybe on something about the people who are coming back to Syria. and people who are getting back together, especially because I got a lot of friends who were in north of Syria. I didn't see them in 8 years. Now I'm seeing them, so it's something really emotional. So I'm seeing how the people are expecting, because it feels like we were too serious, and now we are like discovering each other. We are seeing each other after years of separation. So this is something that we really need to talk about and maybe to work on.
Yeah, and if I understand correctly, you might be able to interview Sara for that. Sara, you're planning on going home. Are you moving back to Syria?
Yes, I am. Hopefully by the end of this month, I will be back in Damascus.
And what sort of reaction have you seen from your friends and family?
It's unbelievable. For the very first time, colleagues of ours, writers, journalists from inside Syria and from my own team members are using their real names for the very first time. So there is a sense of also like professional validation, personal and professional validation, being able to use your name. Imagine how simple a right that is for the very first time in 13 years or even more. And so it's a catharsis. There's no other word that could describe this moment, really.
I want to thank both of you for being our guests. Sara and Zeina, thank you so much for coming on the show. We appreciate you sharing your work and your stories with us, and that will bring us to our quote of the week. It comes from the BBC's Lena Sanjab, and she wrote, quote, "Friends and family members who fled have been texting me saying they are coming back. It seems everyone wants to return home. My central Damascus apartment was destroyed in 2013 when I left after authorities deemed me a traitor and banned me from living there. It will take time to rebuild it, but that's what I will do. And perhaps when it is ready, Syria will be ready for all of us to come back." That's it for this edition of Scoop. Thank you for watching. Please stay tuned to France 24.